heaven. I'm up all night trying to make it with my veterans. Up all night hearing whispers from the devil. I can't lie, I fucking love it. This world's cold, someone open up a fucking oven. Man, this world needs love, needs some fucking loving. But fuck it, there's too much shit that people fucking up with. So fuck it, let it burn, burn, baby burn. And maybe they'll learn, maybe learn. And please, if they fake, please can come on my funeral. They took too long to listen, I don't want nothing to do with them.
He was like, what's going on? And that's when there was like, Mr. York is in jail and Kath Johnson. And then all of us just start crying and tears and stuff like that. They said because of molestation. We was like, molestation? He never molested nobody.
I first got involved in this case the next day following the arrest and what I can only describe as the invasion of Tamaray. Myself and another brother who accompanied me came to Tamaray, and we asked the brothers who were at the gate, was there anything that we can do to help in the case. We was, turned around by the brothers, and we were told that they didn't need no help at this time. And from that point, we were just observing news media reports, press conferences that was conducted by the sheriff of Putnam County, as well as the bond hearing. And we had gained certain observations that I felt at the time were very detrimental from a news media point of view against Dr. York, from a judicial point of view against his presumption of innocence. And at that point, I had got some research down in reference to the federal laws that were used against Dr. York. I was also looking at certain acts, Child Rights Act, Crime Act, as well as the Mann Act. And when I looked at all these acts, I decided to write an 11-page presumption of innocence. At that time, I felt that Dr. York's presumption of innocence was being eroded in the press as well as in the courts. And so I wrote this presumption of innocence, and I tried to come up to Tamaray around 2002 to present my findings to the Nawabian community.
I became involved in the case. A brief history of it. I knew about the arrest of Dr. York in 2002, and from my office in Athens at the time, I had my office located in Baxter Street in Athens. In January of 2003, I read that Dr. York had pled guilty to the charges on a federal and a state level, which was surprising to me when I read that in the newspaper, the Athens Daily Herald. And then about 6 months later, I read that, well, it was a concern to me because it was an allegation of a plea bargain, but I know in federal court you can't truly enter a plea bargain to sentencing. In the state level you can. Because there's what they call a pre-sentence investigation report. So in January when I read that, it sounded a little funny, but nevertheless in June of 2003 I was reading the paper, and I found that the judge had in fact rejected it at a federal level, the plea bargain at a federal level. And at that point I knew Dr. York was in big trouble, because it was about 6 months of publicity stating that he had pled guilty. And I remember telling one of my staff members, I said, how in the world are you going to get a fair trial now?
I knew this was all a big plot, and he didn't want to fight this case because he was made a deal with them. Took over $1.5 million, as I'm told by my sister, in cash money from our tribe, and flaunted it and didn't even use it. Never intended on having a trial, but intended to put together a bogus plea. But they knew I wasn't going to take a plea, so they had to torture me into taking a plea.
Now, in that torture, you were, what was the experience that you learned of the other co-defendants?
I was told that they were being treated the same way I'm treated. That means I was sleeping on a concrete floor with real poor bad food, wasn't getting my medication, watching rats and roaches, bugs and stuff, in the midst of very dangerous criminals, burglary, fights breaking out, people getting stabbed, suicides. I watched 4 or 5 people commit suicide. I was put up in the middle of a riot up in Atlanta, and some guy some Italian guy from the mafia supposed to hung himself. When there was a riot between the Florida boys and the Georgia boys. All this is going in the black Muslims of, you know what I mean? And I said, yeah, these kids are something. I knew the sheriff how religious feels, right? Got names for these 2 young ladies, which is Chandra Lamkin and Khadija Merritt, out of an AEO magazine that we put out. That's the only people in this case involves 3 people that's in a magazine. That's where he got the names from. He got Johnson's name because Kathy Johnson is standing behind me in the magazine while we're advertising Egyptian attire for our lodge. Those 2 girls are being described as looking exactly a replica to the ancient Egyptian deities, right? So that's where he got the Sandra Lamkin, Khadija Merritt, and Kathy Johnson to put the case. And he figured they'll torture them. If I think they're tortured, I know that Kathy suffered from MS, which is a very, very dangerous disease. I said, they're not giving me my medicine. Hers is brain deteriorating. She'll be crippled for life. They used that, not to mention starvation, sleep degradation, when they kept waking me up, no allowed to the telephone calls, interfere with my mail, definitely poor diet, a whole bunch of things, and just outright vulgar and physical abuse.
Now, prior to this so-called agreement that was given to you,
yes.
What was told to you that about the other co-defendants during this whole torturous experience?
They told me that those people would go home free. Totally free, there'd be nothing to be all over it, and you'd be the one that bears the burden. Because after all, you're the trophy that Putnam County wants. The state of Georgia wants you, that's it. The land, they'll leave their people in those land alone, and everything will go away. And that's the promises that they were lying. They kept me up for 3 days, Garland's firm. They kept sending in their own psychiatrists, and they kept me up all the way to the day before. I didn't have but, I don't know how many hours exactly. 8.
1 more minute for your call.
I think I had about 8 hours to make a decision on the plea. It wasn't like I had time to go back and forth and if I waited on him. They kept me up all night with psychiatrists. I didn't say that next morning we got to get the plea now, this morning. And my stepdaughter, Michelle York, was there to verify that.
Now, Mr. York, or Chief Black Thunderbird Eagle, as I should say, to show you honor and respect, it just said that there's 1 more minute for your call, but I do have more questions and would like for you to call back if that's at all possible.
I'll call back.
Okay, I'm going to hang up now. Yes, hello?
Hello. You have a collect call from Malachi.
Hello?
Rahobat.
Rahobat. Maku, Chief Black Thunderbird Eagle, we left off at discussing the plea agreements.
Yes.
Now, within these plea agreements that you were tortured into taking,
right,
was the 476 acres of land, and I think I also heard of an exuberant amount of money that was taken during the raid.
Right.
Were those all mentioned in this plea agreement?
I never got a chance to read the plea agreement. That was the whole thing. They kept me under the pressure and scrutiny of their psychiatrist over the whole night. And then took me back to the cell around 4 or 5, and then called me back out at 6, before I could even get back to get to sleep. And then started with the plea agreement. I never read the papers. I never knew nothing about the papers, like the PSR or PSI, whatever they call it. I didn't know anything about none of that stuff. They had already had this thing planned. I know that when they did jump down on those people's land, and the land was verified as theirs and not mine by a judge in Putnam County, I think Hugh Winfield, right? They did take an exuberant amount of money from them. I know when they went into my house in 55 Mansfield in Athens County, Athens, Georgia, Clark County, where I live, where I'm registered, they took money out of my private money out of my house, which is legal.
Right.
I know they didn't find no weapons, they didn't find nothing that would implement me. If they did find anything in my house, then it was put in there by Abigail Washington, who was taking care of that house.
So you are registered to vote, and your legal residence is Athens, Clark County?
Clark County. I'm registered to vote. I voted in Clark County. I'm registered when I purchased that house at 155 Mansfield. They asked me my nationality. I made it clear then I was a Native American. It wasn't something I came up with overnight.
Right. And going on, just moving forward within this time period, that was January 24th of 2002 that that you were tortured and taking these plea agreements. Now, you were imprisoned all the way up and currently still incarcerated all the way up until May 29th was a sentencing date?
Yes.
Now, at that point in time, were you given any indication or anything going on with your case from any of your attorneys between
I wasn't
January
getting
24th?
no communication from the Garland firm. Every now and then they would send a little guy in called Charles. Or, you know what I'm saying? And he would actually discuss the Bible and history with me. Nothing to do with that. He was trying to get those guys. He would not even go into, anything with the case. Garland made it clear that he didn't think he could beat this case. And I was like, it's time to get rid of him. After he had taken $1.5 million from our tribe, he was ready to sign over an agreement, which his firm is known for, selling agreements and selling people out. I told him from day one, I did not trust him. Then the judge tried to claim the other day that this is some new idea and proven, but that is proven false the following day by Mr. Rod Peaches in his own article, where he states very clearly that Malachi told the psychiatrist way back that he did not trust Garland. He said he was working with SEALs. So if that's true, then the letter I issued to the judge the other morning in downstairs in a private meeting, because he didn't want to hear it in the public because he was afraid of its implications, that he made his own personal assumption that this is something I feel you did. There's a ploy you're doing. How's that possible if I already told a legally recognized Georgia State psychiatrist that I didn't trust the man, and it's on their records.
So, okay, on May 28th, that is when I was reading in the article that a meeting had taken place between the judge, the Garland firm, and the prosecution. Now, were you present at that meeting?
I was not, but I found out later I was supposed to have been, but I was not present. He went on and moved and with I think, a plea agreement and a whole bunch of different things I didn't know nothing about. All I knew is they were telling me, you're going to plead guilty so you can get these people out and you're going to get to your medication. You'll be put in a nice facility as an old man where you can, you'll still be able to write your books and do the things you do. But those people, those young women and Kathy Johnson will be free and it'll all be over with. No details were given to me about anything. I'd never been into the situation before. I never understood what was going on about this here case. So I didn't understand how the federal system works. I didn't understand about pleas. I didn't understand about none of this stuff, about what they call conspiracies and all that kind of stuff. Let alone RICO and all these all new words. That's only television terms to me.
Right. Now, in that meeting, it was brought to my attention that the prosecution was wanting to drop 3 charges, just to get the plea.
Right. That's what I heard. They was going to drop the charges. Now, so they came to the court with the intent to drop the charges. Mr. Lawson didn't want that to happen because Mr. Lawson, of course, working with the system also was trying to prevent the indigenous status, and they want to take those and lock, of course, me away as an orphan, block the doctrine I propagate forever. So they blocked Mr. Moultrie and Mr. Wood, who was there, from put into the court, put before the court that they must respond to it, and they would just actually ignore motions like they never existed. In some motions, they actually transformed the motion from one name and put the U.S. government on it so they can hide the motion that was pointing out that Mr. Moultrie had to present if they had any more intention of sabotaging or what they call ambushing, they're going to have any more charges, any more things, and they hid that there. And to this day, they wouldn't address it. And to another day, Metric Court was brought up again by Mr. Patrick Adams, the new attorney on the case, and still they're avoiding it.
Yeah, still locked up. All them plea deals made under threat, duress, coercion, sleep deprivation. Crazy. You know what I mean? Denying doc is medicine. Crazy, you know? Crazy. Oh, you never heard? Yeah. Dr. York L. They know what they did. Ain't no fair trials with yellow journalism, reporting false info. Destroyed the land, destroyed all the pyramids. You know what they did? Arresting Doc at the shopping mall, like he got so much arms that he's dangerous. Crazy, it's so crazy. You don't even know. Y'all don't even study. Y'all got Nuwapian Moore's Constitution. How y'all let him get locked up, yo? How y'all let it happen?
Well, basically, in the federal system, court system, Dr. York was indicted under the Mann Act, indicted under 4 counts, right? We had the Mann Act, Title 18-24-23A, which was transporting minors across interstate for the purpose of having illegal sex or unlawful sex. And you had Title 1824-23B, which constitutes traveling. All right. Now, the difference between transport and traveling is that on one hand, they're saying that through money, intent, you cause person or persons to go through the transportation system, where it could be Greyhound or anything that you did not personally engage in terms of steering them to that particular destination for the person having sex, and traveling meaning that you facilitated it. Okay, either they drove in your car or you were accompanying them, all right, across interstate for the purpose of having unlawful sex. Those were the main two charges. They also cited the statute of limitations, their right to prosecute this case, under Title 3282. Okay, 3283. Okay, and what they had done through the federal law, they superseded a general statute of limitation, which was 5 years. Okay, by amending another statute of limitation to that. Okay, so the general offenses, all right, as long as it wasn't capital, all right, was 5 years. Okay, then all right, they had put this other statute, which I felt at the time was in opposition to a statute of limitation that was already on the books. All right, now you got two statute of limitations. One that was the nature of it was dealing with white slavery, okay, and also dealing with giving the prosecutor, I think, 25 years or so to prosecute for unlawful sexual activity. Okay, now keep in mind now, at no time did the federal government ever use the word molestation. All right, they use sexual activity. If you go back and look at the Mann Act, which was created to go after Jack Johnson in around 1910, all right, the act was specifically designed for prostitution, okay, white slavery, and transporting of that across the commercial avenues of the federal highways of the federal government.
The United States White Slave Traffic Act of 1910 prohibited so-called white slavery. It also banned the interstate transport of females for immoral purposes. Its primary stated intent was to address prostitution, immorality, and human trafficking. The act is better known as the Mann Act, after James Robert Mann, an American lawmaker. The first person prosecuted under the act was black heavyweight boxing champion Jack Johnson.
It's all good. It's really all good. It's all good. Yeah. Zadok L put me on MC and MAC on the Euro last names Moorish family tree. Questioning Muslims and Christian belief systems. Battling county zoning bylaw fictions. Some say planet risk, I call him Yamasi Chief Black Eagle. Come to teach Nubian people. Nuwapians are Moorish cause ancient Egypt is stagnant. They so sick he brought them holy tablets. Forgot they drew Ali those following Imam Isa. Signing with no rights reserved on corporate visas. Trump up charges by the city of Georgia. Hearing the torture he got would give you nausea and make you question the trial judge and jury. Deliberating drinking liquor from the State's brewery. Sounds like a conspiracy from what I've seen. Nuwapian should sue the state under Title 18.
Clearly in my mind, Ed Garland was saying that this is an unusual prosecution, okay, that appeared to be only selected to go after Dr. York. Now, Ed Garland was challenging jurisdiction at that point, and of the federal government, okay? But he never got specific as to describing, all right, what the jurisdictional issue was in reference to the federal government using state law, all right? But And the judge told him at some point, you can challenge jurisdiction. That means that the judge acknowledged that it was a jurisdictional issue that Ed Garland was bringing up. To this very day, Ed Garland never challenged jurisdiction, or let's say he never challenged the right jurisdiction. He allowed Frank Urbano to put in a motion dealing with Dr. York's Indian jurisdiction, and that was totally erroneous, because you cannot define who you are in law after the fact. Okay? You had to show that you were well established. If you were a diplomat, you had to show that you was well established as a diplomat before you got arrested. Okay? And to this very day, like they're doing now in this case about this Mexican who had murdered somebody, and they found out that he was never allowed to make a call to his embassy.
A Mexican national on death row in the US has been executed despite Mexican authorities pleading for his life to be spared. Ruben Cardenas was given a lethal injection at the Texas death chamber in Huntsville for the rape and strangling of his 16-year-old cousin more than 20 years ago. He told investigators he was high on cocaine at the time. The Cardenas case drew protests from Mexican diplomats who said Texas prosecutors did not follow due process and did not let Cardenas speak with Mexican consular officials. US authorities neglected to notify Mexico about the arrest and failed to hold a review required by the United Nations International Court in The Hague. Texas executes more criminals than any other US state, which has long caused friction with Mexico, which has no death penalty.
The due sovereignty doctrine and due prosecution rule clearly says that the federal government, being a sovereign entity, and the state being a sovereign entity, can prosecute you for the same crime. All right? Can the federal government prosecute you for a crime that only the state has in its law books? All right? It's one thing the state has said, hey, we ain't gonna get involved in this. You know, the federal government can assume state authority. That didn't happen in this case. All right? They had, because of due sovereignty doctrine, they had brought Dr. York in from federal court into state court, and as well as Kathy Johnson, federal court and the state court, simply based on a waiver that Dr. York lawyer made, Ed Garland, giving them the authority to proceed in doing that.
Sounds like a conspiracy from what I've seen. Nuwaubians should sue the state under Title 18 instead of marching and picketing like niggas they not. Nuwaubians came to the temple and taking shots at Drew Ali, almost trying to diss the program but silent when I asked to see their Doc Morris holy Koran.
L, another political prisoner, kidnapped for opening the minds of the listener, and he knew he might get caught out for a fraud, so he told y'all, wear your mask of God. Now L, another political prisoner, kidnapped for opening the minds of the listener, and he knew he might get called out for a fraud, so he told y'all, wear your mask of God. 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 Wear your mask of God.
Jacob wanted all of us meaning me, Nicole, Karima, he was talking to a couple of people, different people that left the community. He wanted us to bring a case against his father.
The conspiracy to bring down Dr. York was known by me in 2002. The main axis of and the motive behind it was Jacob York's, also known or is known as, his legal name is Yaqub Muhammad. The conspiracy that involved him and the numerous other ex-members of our community.
I know all of the alleged victims personally. They lived at my house. I was in South Beach with them, like I said before, and I just want the public to know what really happened. To know that Malachi York is innocent. He never molested any children. He didn't do anything.
Yeah, he's behind it all because we all sat down and we talked, and you know, we was gonna figure out how we was gonna set it up. We were just going to back each other's story in whichever way we could, even if it meant lying for each other.
The charges brought up against Malachi were all lies. We did back each other's story up.
When most of the girls left the land, they came to my father's house to live in my father's house. Arlene Hamilton, Karima, she moved there. Ada Nicole Lopez, she came too. And that struck me as odd because when she left, her mother was already off the land and she could have lived with her mother, and she could have lived with her father as well, because her father, he wasn't even involved with the organization. But she was in contact with him. She knew how to get in contact with him. She knew where he lived, because ironically he didn't even really live that far from my home. He lived about 15 minutes away. And it struck me as odd that she moved there, but then again it didn't, because I knew that she was involved with my brother. She was molesting my brother when he was maybe about 13 or 14. He was living on the land at the time. I think she was like 23, and she was molesting him. So once I remembered that, I was like, okay, so that's why she's here.
It all started when Tia Thomas, who was a girl that I was talking to, when she left the land. When she left the land, we started dating, we started to talk. I asked her why she left. She never mentioned anything about molestation, anything like that. She just wanted to just leave because she was upset. She never explained to me why she left totally, but she just left.
I would see Jacob talking to the girls, saying that he wanted to get this plot against his father, and he wanted to go to the FBI, saying that his father was molesting girls, and that he wanted the girls to say that his father was molesting them.
Jacob told me that some of the girls and boys that left the community had went to the government about different things that was going on in the community, meaning child molestation. Before I left the community, I was the main person in charge of the finances, as well as in charge of anything that went on with the community, the living, eating, anything, the financial, anything that happened regarding any of the members in the community. I dealt with that, so I was basically in charge.
In May of 2001, Jacob invited me on a trip to Florida that he planned for Memorial Day weekend. He told me that a lot of people I knew were going, to make me want to go more. He named Habiba Washington, Arlene Hamilton, Esther Cole, Atia Thomas, Nicole Lopez, and Farah Muhammad. He told me to come along with them and maybe I would change my mind. I didn't go on a trip. I stopped communicating with Jacob because he told me I had to choose his world or Mr. York's world.
One case in particular, I saw Lemuel LaRoche, what's his name? Bruce Baeth Smith and Ahmed Smith, they're brothers. They approached Esther Cole and Dina Cole. They came to their apartment and they were like, we need you to say that you were molested by Mr. York and that you saw young children being molested and that you brought children to him so that he could molest them. And they were like, no, we don't want to do that. That never happened. We never saw any children being molested. He never molested us. We don't want to be a part of that. We just want to move on with our lives. Nothing like that ever happened to us.
Jacob told me that the FBI knew who I was and that they were told about certain things that I've done in the community, and some of those things I can be incriminated for. Jacob told me that if I don't go to the FBI first, then they would come after me, they would incarcerate me, they would take my children away from me, because there are things that they were told about me that could incriminate me.
I didn't go along with it when he told me he was going to go to the FBI, and I understand if a person is mad, and of course if it's family, you have the right to be mad at whoever you want, but I felt like he was taking it a little too far, and I was not going to be in on that one.
With me, it was like you was in charge, you had control of a lot of things, and so anybody could say this about you and it would be believable because you was in charge. There was no denying that I was in charge. I was in charge. So I felt that I had to go along with the story because I couldn't prove anything that anybody would say against me. I didn't feel that I could prove it. I mean, he told me that once they tell the FBI something, the FBI is looking into you. They start looking into me. There was no way that I can prove that what anybody said about me wasn't the truth or wasn't a lie. There was no way. So I felt compelled to just go ahead with the story.
So the next day, Jacob called Tia and asked Tia to come to the house. We went to the house, and then it was her and some other Vanessas there as well, and he was explaining to her what was going on, meaning that when I went there, they was on the internet harassing Doc on his website and talking to the lady in New York, the reporter in New York, about how they were going to set up this whole conspiracy. I was witness to it, whatever, and I was like looking at her like, wow, you know, why are they doing this? You know, what's going on? So they're talking and, you know, explaining to me, hey, yeah, we're going to do this, we're going to say this, we're going to just organizing what they're going to say to the reporters.
Even while we were in Florida, we met the girls, we meaning the girls, there were a lot of people on the trip, but the girls never went anywhere if Jacob didn't take us. We were always kind of babysat, supervised by Jacob. We always stayed in the hotel. We never went anywhere unless Jacob was there. And while we were at the hotel, he would keep saying, okay, well, I need you to say that you were molested, and I need you to say that you brought children to Mr. York to molest them. And he would just, you know, try to get people to go along with the story. He even tried to get me to go along with the story as well, but I told him, you know, I never lived on the land, so it didn't make sense to say that I was molested because I never lived there. I wasn't close to Mr. York. And that kind of ousted me from the trip because I wasn't in on, you know, the conspiracy, so there was really no need for me to be like around or whatever.
But Jacob proceeded to say that there were some things that some of the other members, some of the other ex-members had went to the government with, and that I should really, really talk to them and see what's up and see how I can clear my name so that I'm not prosecuted for any of those things.
Well, Jake was the one who was telling them what to say, and then they came up with, you know, what they're going to say, what sounds right, what sounds believable. What, you know, just pretty much. I mean, Karima and Ada was on the internet, you know, harassing Dr. York on the internet, saying, you this and you're that because of anger. And I asked her, I said, why are you doing this? She said, oh, because I'm just upset. And I was like, okay, cool. I didn't feel comfortable, so I left, and I left Tia there.
In the car ride back, Habiba Washington was in the car, Jacob, Ada, Nicole Lopez, Karima, Arlene Hamilton was in the car, me and Rashid. We were all in the car, and Jacob brought up the conversation again, how he wanted to go to the FBI with the story of child molestation, and that he needed the girls to say that they were molested. They saw girls and boys being molested, and especially say this to Habiba because she was in charge, and he knew that she was in charge, and he told her that people already had went to the FBI against her, saying that she brought them to Mr. York to be molested, and that there was no way for her to convince the FBI, to prove to FBI that, you know, that it never happened, and that she needed to go along with the story so that she wouldn't be brought down with Mr. York. She continued to tell him that, you know, he never molested me, I never saw anyone being molested, I don't want to do that. But he insisted on her, you know, going along with the story. They went back and forth about it, and he just told her that they would talk about it later.
On our way back to Florida, from Florida, the trip back from Florida, we was driving in Jacob's car again. It was myself, Karima, Nicole, Farah, Noah Rashid, and some other driver, I don't remember his name. And Jacob brought up the conversation again, how he thinks that we should really go to the government with a story about his father. Anything that we didn't like in the community, we should go, because his father needed to be in jail. His father did not do good things. He was not happy with his father, and he really felt that a case should be brought up against his father. He really felt that his father should be put away for life.
Another political prisoner, kidnapped for opening the minds of the listener, and he knew he might get caught up for a fraud, so he told y'all, wear your mask of God. Another political prisoner, kidnapped for opening the minds of the listener, and he
said his son made him make up the lies in conspiracy with CIA and FBI. AEO audios, the black book kept me high in spirits. Master teacher's voice, I still hear it.
What's important, particularly in today's society with use of the internet, and pretty much since the O.J. Simpson trial pretty much, is that the defense has to be coordinated with the individual, and in this case the organization, in mounting an efficient trial in the press. You can't just wait for the courtroom to try your case. You got to start trying your case from the time anything comes out in the press negative about your client. Needs a response to that. If not, the public presumes it's true. All right, you say client is a pedophile, no response from the defendant, that he must be a pedophile. You follow me? So what you had is a disconnect between the concerned people in the organization and the defense team. You had one of the major problems, and I think this actually caused one of the problems, is I think you had a defense team at that time that did not truly understand the significance of Dr. York to the black community, okay? And so, you know, they kind of were like lackluster in responding. Some of that was the organization's fault, okay? And we'll get to that farther later. But it is very imperative at the time, like Bundy was saying in like his letter address, at the time the judge said this, and I think that you know, by saying that, he was destroying the presumption of innocence, but it's up to the defense team and organization to get together and say, look, what are we going to do?
Dr. York had a black attorney by the name of Leroy Johnson, who was his attorney before GARLAND law firm, which was a white law firm. Leroy Johnson, at that bond hearing, was successful in getting Kathy Johnson a bond, $75,000 bond, based on his assertion before the court that Kathy Johnson had suffered an illness, okay? And because of that illness, he didn't feel that she would be a threat as far as flight. Now, during that time, the court had to have knowledge through the pre-sentencing report that Dr. York also had the illness. Well, that issue was never brought up by the GARLAND court, okay? And nobody within Dr. York's circle had openly made that an issue to the lawyers. Maybe they had done it, and maybe it just wasn't looked at. But I think had that would have been looked at, all right, then you would have had the judge, you would put the judge in a very precarious position where Dr. York, I think he had the serious enough illness. He would have to decide, well, why would you let a woman off because of the illness, and let Doc not off because of this serious illness? See, that would have been an issue before that judge. And I believe that was purposely not done. Okay, that's my belief. Okay, so that effect would not have occurred. All right. As a result, Dr. York was in prison, sick, was deprived of his medicines, and his doctor was not allowed to come, his personal physician was not allowed to come and visit his patient. Okay? And that started a whole, you know, a different process.
Now I've read in many articles that you suffer from a condition called hereditary angioedema.
That's correct.
Now, were you given your medicine at any time?
And it was informed from the time I was arrested, I'm on medication, and I have a chronic disease that 30% of the people that have it die. Right? Especially, and it's really activated from aggravation, frustration, and tension, which could be more expressed by the way we was being harassed, you know, attacked in the streets there in Bowen. So when I got up to Atlanta, which is the worst prison in the whole state of Georgia, which has been admitted in the newspapers, right? I told them I needed my medication, that I need this, and they wouldn't give it to me. I kept telling them I need medication. I told them what I had. They couldn't give it to me. Doctors, what they had no idea what angioedema was. So he was running around, a Filipino doctor, an Ethiopian doctor, what to do, and they wouldn't do nothing about it. That's for sure. So I got locked into a cell, me and 3 other men. One of them was named happened to be Byron Pitt, so I happened to learn that he helped to save my life, in fact, because I was sleeping on the floor. One guy was sleeping on a bunk, another one was sleeping on another bunk, another one was sleeping under the bunk in a 2-man cell up there. Rats, roaches, filth. You know what I mean? I mean, it's a mess. You know what I mean? The dietary.
The RICO Act, or Racketeering, Influence, and Corrupt Organizations Act, is a statute originally enacted in 1970 to control organized crime, such as the mafia. The statute makes it unlawful to conduct or conspire to conduct an enterprise whose activities affect interstate commerce by committing or agreeing to commit a pattern of racketeering activity. To establish violations of RICO statute, 4 elements must be proven. 1. First, the prosecution must demonstrate that the defendants were associated with an enterprise as defined in the U.S. Code 18, Section 19614. 2. Or second, the government must prove that the enterprise engages in or its activities affect interstate commerce. 3. Or third, the government is required to prove that each defendant agreed to participate in the enterprise by actually committing or agreeing to commit at least 2 predictable offenses. A pattern of racketeering activities requires 2 or more predicate acts within a 10-year time frame and must be connected with each other in some logical manner for an unlawful end. 4, or the fourth, is that the government must prove that each defendant agreed to participate in the affairs of the enterprise by actually committing or agreeing to commit at least 2 predicate offenses.
Yeah. What it is, Dr. York was charged on the federal RICO statute that was designed to attack organized crime, the Italian mafia specifically. But what happened after the initial attacks on organized crime, the RICO statute was used, and there's a body of literature on this, was inappropriately used to attack certain black leaders, or it just inappropriately used generally. In this case, against Dr. York. And the reason for that is when you have an otherwise weak case, you can use the RICO statute, and it I would say basically alleviates the necessity of the beyond a reasonable doubt standard on a lot of, I guess, a direct criminal charge. In other words, you can do a very small thing, be linked with what they call unknown conspirators, and still be guilty of a crime, whether you knew or did not know the ultimate object of the conspiracy. Basically, that's what the RICO law says. And, but this was more in the case of known organized crime figures, all right? Now, in the RICO charge, what's the necessary elements, you have to show racketeering activity, meaning you have to show more than one alleged crime. All right, now, in this case, there was the government was trying to show interstate commerce was used, or the interstate was used, or there was transactions on in interstate commerce with the intent of committing a crime, which was child molestation. All right. That was one crime, and that was the majority of the crimes alleged. However, you had to show another crime to show a pattern of racketeering activity, or you could not sustain your RICO charge. All right. So if you only show interstate commerce, you only got just that, transportation of children for the purpose of sex. You don't have a RICO charge, which destroys your statute of limitations from you have a statute of limitations process. All right. Now, so they had to have the money structuring charge to justify racketeering activity. You follow me? Because you got another crime. Now, our argument before the appellate court was, look, you have an allegation of money structuring, but there's no evidence whatsoever that even if the interstate transportation of minors was true, there was no profits made from it. There was nothing that links this alleged money structuring charge with the transport. Generally, in the organized crime situation, you'll have a house of prostitution, or and money was used, profits from that were taken to put in the bank or not put it in the bank or whatever you were doing. Money laundering, murder for hire, bank run. Says the organization were operating in several different crimes, which would be a pattern of racketeering activity. But the government in this case struggled to show the pattern of racketeering activity, so they were searching for another crime. You follow me? The two had nothing to do with each other, and we argued that. And it seems like the judges picked up on that, but I think at the appellate level, but I think at that point they were already pretty much like, we're not going to let this guy out. The government failed to prove when Richard Moultrie was asked what was the connection between the two, and he said none, pretty much.
Yeah, yeah. And you know, and also too, the tragedy of this case also, if you look at the dates that these RICO offenses occurred, they were all in 1999, all right? Now, that's the money structure, okay? Now, Dr. York been up here since 1993. I'm quite sure he was doing banking, all right, before 1999, before the offenses. Or let's assume that he started banking in 1993. And that's, you're talking about 6 years, all right, after the offense, the initial offenses. The initial offenses was 1993. So you're talking about 6 years, all of a sudden, RICO offenses, okay? Now, all right, no one can argue that the RICO offenses was used to finance acts of molestation that happened in 1993, okay? But that's what the court have concluded, all right, when they said that, you know, in order to join two offenses that by nature should have been misjoined, okay? So you got a situation now where, and also you had testimony by Abigail, who was the chief witness against Dr. York for the prosecution, who testified that there were times that
it was more than, it was less or more than 10,000.
Yeah, less or more than 10,000, and she was the one who was making the money. She was making the decisions. Okay, so that took the intent away from Dr. York and attached it to him, to her, and the federal government still, all right, pursued it as though Dr. York was the one who was running the financial picture, and it was clear based on the government's own witness testimony that he wasn't running the picture.
Situation. Yes, I was in charge of the finances, and a lot of the financial decisions that were made were by me at the time that I was in charge. When I wasn't in charge, when it was Kathy that was in charge, the financial decisions were made by her. Malachi did not make financial decisions. We collected the money, we separated the money. When I was in charge of where the money went, how the money was handled, how it was separated. He never sat us down and told us to avoid the FBI or avoid the IRS or avoid doing anything illegal with his money. As a matter of fact, he was very, very serious about handling his finances in a legal way. So anything that happened with the finances, when I was in charge, it was my decision to decide what happened with the finances, where it went, and how it was handled. And the same goes for anybody else who was in charge prior to me or after me. That's how it was done.
What we're saying is, if you're going to bring both charges, separate them. Charge money instruction in one indictment, charge, you know, interstate commerce in another. But by joining them, you justify the RICO. And that, I mean, it's still no evidence that the two were connected. I think that was admitted by the government at the arguments. And that's why we argue that point, you know, and I still think it's a valid point.
See, what you're gonna find in that Supreme Court decision, I mean U.S. Supreme Court appeal decision, is that they stayed away from any issue that would have been looked at as favorable to Dr. York.
Right. They just said it was moot.
Yeah, they said it was a moot issue, okay, but they stayed away from that, all right? And they told you clearly on the face of the decision that they looked at evidence in light most favorable to the government, all right? Now, to me, in that is a bias.
Right.
All right, because the courts are not supposed to operate on a faulty presumption. All right, okay, but when they do this, they operate on the presumption that A, the government is always right, B, there's no criminals in government, and C, government officials are only doing their job. All right, and I think that's in itself a detriment to a presumption of innocence in a criminal matter.
Color of office and authority in making. Made dark sleep on ice blocks, force fed bacon. To force sleepless nights before the trial date. Trump up charges of child molesting and rape. Witnesses said his son made her make up the lies. In conspiracy with CIA and FBI. AEO audios, the black book kept me high in spirits. Master teacher's voice, I still hear it.
Sadat L, another political prisoner, kidnapped for opening the minds of the listener. And he knew he might get caught out for a fraud, so he told y'all, wear your mask of God. Sadat L, another political prisoner, kidnapped for opening the minds of the listener. And he knew he might get caught out for a fraud, so he told y'all, wear your mask of God. 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 Wear your mask of God.